My husband calls this my mermaid cup. I got it as a sign that I'm out of my gothic era, and my reading this month would disagree. Also, if it sounds like there's a bunch of 19-year-old hooligans on a sports team outside my window, it's because there is, and I just beg that you try to ignore them, and hopefully I can fix it in editing, but probably not completely because they're really loud. This month I read 8 books. I read a ton of different random things like nonfic, gothic, romantasy. I read all of it. I'm gonna just start telling you about them. Everything I read in July. If you're new here, my name is Steph. I talk about books, reading and writing them. Welcome. Okay, the first 2 books that I want to talk about, they're part of a duology. Obviously, no spoilers. I'm going to mostly talk about the first one. I listened to these on audio. That is The Bridge Kingdom and The Traitor Queen. I really thought they were pretty well written. This is like a romantasy, political romantasy. There's not really any magic necessarily. But in this we follow primarily Laura. It is dual POV, who is married off to this other king in a different kingdom as part of like a political alliance arrangement, but she's actually supposed to kill him. Like, she's getting married to him to assassinate him, right? She has been training to do this her entire life. I really liked Laura. There was this edge of viciousness, just enough recklessness, but she wasn't quite stupid. You know, just enough about her that gives her an edge. It makes her really interesting, but at the same time, she's empathetic and fundamentally pretty good. Obviously, she grew up being trained to do this in a really insular and like small world and small environment. So her little world is like kind of exploded when she begins to experience life in this other territory and meeting like different kinds of people. It's kind of a slower burn, but very, very political. So you have to be kind of in it for the politics as well, not smut, because you're not going to get gobs and gobs of spice. See, so this was right up my alley. I have written, the end is so satisfying, the end of the first book. I have no memory of what the end of the first book completely was. Like, I have very vague memories of what it was, except that it ended on a cliffhanger. And then for the second or the sequel, it was okay. I enjoyed it, but not quite as much as the first book. That usually happens for me. But I think what my greatest challenge with the second book is that it was really missing some quiet character moments. We sprang forward into all of this action, and then there was so few moments where the characters were there together and like processing some of the stuff that was going on. And I just really missed that aspect that I think there was a lot more of in the first. So that's The Bridge Kingdom and The Traitor Queen. This is a duology, but there are multiple books in the series, kind of like how Carissa Broadbent is doing her thing with the Vampire Nyaxia universe. So there's like a duology per couple. I don't know if I'm going to continue. It's not like high priority to continue. I kind of got what I was looking for when I needed it from this duology, and I'm pretty content for the moment with that. The next book that I read was Juniper Thorn. This is actually a reread for me. I love this book. It's one of my favorites. It is a very loose retelling of the juniper tree, and every time I try to kind of give a plot summary, I really fail at it, so I'll do my best. In it, we're following Martian. She is one of 3 sisters who are all living under the power of this like tyrannical wizard father, who people in this city that's sort of turn of the century, Russia-ish, they come to him to have magic done. Martian herself has some extent of magical power as well. As I said, they're living in a really controlling environment until one night she slips out and goes to the ballet where she meets Sebastian. He, as a character and a person, combined with the experience of going outside of her father's power, kind of disrupts the way that she thinks about herself and her entire life up until that moment. A lot of people have a really hard time with the content of this book and some of the ways that it's explored. I think that she does an absolutely incredible job of dealing with issues like trauma. It can be a difficult read. I love it. This is a great book. After that, I read The Burial Plot. This is more of a historical fiction. I haven't read one of those in a long time, but it was gothic and the cover is beautiful. In this book, we're following Bonnie. She is a sort of working class woman in London in the 1800s, and she has a romantic relationship with this guy named Crawford, who's really involved and invested in the funeral business and like burial ground graveyard business. He's a bit of a shady guy, okay? Bonnie gets herself into a spot of trouble where she needs to leave London quite quickly. Crawford convinces her to go to this guy's house and pretend that she's a lady's maid or like governess kind of character for this guy's daughter. And essentially they're trying to swindle him, but things don't necessarily go as planned. So obviously Bonnie goes into this guy's house and is like taking care of his daughter. He's a widow fairly recently. It has major Rebecca vibes, just in that we're wondering like what happened to that wife. She's kind of got this tense sort of romantic vibe with the homeowner, the daughter's father. Then there's Crawford, who's always being shady somewhere and smoking. It was a fun book. I will say that it was pretty predictable, but it was intriguing enough to like continue reading. I would definitely recommend this to anybody who enjoys Laura Purcell. So that is burial plot. The next book I want to talk about is White as Snow. I was really struggling with this, as I mentioned in my last blog. It was the beginning that I really struggled with. Then it started to get quite interesting and I understood what the author is doing, because I do think it's actually a fascinating book. I think it's out of print now. This was released in the 90s, I believe, but it's part of the fairy tale series that was created by Terry Wilding. She basically asked Tanith Lee, who is like a fantasy horror romance author in the like 80s, 90s. So this is kind of a Snow White, Persephone, Demeter mashup. This blended retelling just felt really unique and really interesting. I thought she did such a fantastic job in exploring the mother-daughter relationship. But I will also say that I think part of that is a missell, maybe because of the time, where I don't know if they could really put it on the back of a book. That point of this book, because I think the author had a point that she was trying to make, was about abortion, specifically pro-choice, and sexual assault. I did not go in knowing that. I was kind of in a slump. I was not in a bad place, but I wasn't really in the mental space to be confronted with some of that. So it took me a little while to get through this book, but I found it to be very creative and interesting, but I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. So Arpesia is the princess of a kingdom. When she's like 14, King Draco invades and takes over, captures her, assaults her, she becomes pregnant, they get married. Very heavy stuff, okay? Then we kind of time skip and we begin exploring some of how the assault affects her experience of herself, how it affects her relationship with her daughter. And then we're also getting a bit of Cora's perspective. This is set in kind of like a vaguely medieval. I honestly might just wait to continue until they stop screaming, because this is so loud. Okay, I think that they are done now, I hope. As I was trying to articulate, this is set in kind of a medieval kingdom where Christianity is the central religion, but then there's also this pagan, sort of Celtic, kind of Greek-inspired religion on the side as well that's practiced by a lot of the town people. To be honest, I didn't totally get some of the world building. I just kind of went with it, and I think you kind of just have to. Unless it was that I kept taking breaks from the beginning of the book that was kind of confusing me. It could have been either or. But there is also this sort of distance in the way that the book is told, because, you know, it's a very fairy tale way, like not necessarily always deeply, viscerally detailing her feelings, but because of the type of content of this book and some of the things that it's confronting, I think that was actually a really good decision. Because it made it possible for me to read it and to continue reading it. But yeah, I just think this is a great book if you were interested in reading like fairy tales, retellings. It was very different from anything I've read recently. It felt very fresh, and I just found it very interesting from a craft perspective to see how she used these different motifs of the apple, the mirror, asphodel. You know, just go in knowing that the conversation that's being had can be a bit of a hard one. You might need to be in the right headspace for it, but I definitely recommend it. I think it's really interesting to read a book that is so clearly political, but also beautifully written. The back cover says that she's like the Angela Carter of fantasy, and I could not agree more. I think that is just the perfect description for this book. Okay, after that I needed something totally different. I needed a palette cleanser. That was The Martian. This is about a guy who is trapped on Mars and he has to try to survive till a rescue mission can be arranged for him, and sort of all the ingenious ways that this engineer, botanist guy comes up with to survive, and then all of the drama that's happening on the ground with NASA. And honestly, I had a good time reading it. I don't think that it was completely like written for me. Like I wasn't necessarily the audience. I feel like there was a lot of guy humor in it, which I still enjoyed. Made reading this one POV from this guy's sort of journal entries of what he did when he was on Mars a lot more interesting and entertaining, because he's like very sarcastic and like, today, like, it's a good thing that I'm the only guy living on Mars right now because my piss stinks. Like, okay, yeah, I know, bro. It was a fun read. I listened to it kind of half on audio, half physically reading it. Yeah, my main kind of critique is that it just didn't really hit emotionally, apart from being very amusing, because we don't really get a whole lot of the main characters' stress, because they're like, oh, he deals with his anxiety by making jokes. But, you know, still, I think internally you would be thinking about your family that's back at home, and will you see them again, even if you only have one family member or like one best friend. That isn't really explored too deeply, and I just can't see how that would not become a really central part of what is occupying your mind. That's like my only real critique. I had fun with it. I'll probably try Project Hail Mary. I would be really interested if you have read The Martian and Hail Mary, which one you preferred, if you thought that there was similarities or differences in terms of how they were written. Yeah, I'm glad I picked up a sci-fi book. It's been a really long time since I've done sci-fi, and I definitely want to try a little bit more of it, especially Paolini's Sea of Stars. That would also be interesting to read soon. But after that, I picked up this Woven Kingdom. I have not read anything by this author. She is the author of Shatter Me, which was something I completely missed out on somehow. I don't know where I was. I was definitely in libraries. I remember seeing it in the library, but my brain was just not there when this book was popular. So this Woven Kingdom is a newer, I think it's a YA fantasy that is inspired by Persian mythology and culture, and it's kind of a retelling of Cinderella as well, but I only caught on to that kind of late in the book. Was very much in the middle of the road about this one. I don't know if I'm going to continue the series, but part of that was definitely how I was just feeling this month. Like, I picked up a lot of books and I just didn't continue with them because I didn't feel like they were hitting, and I knew that was kind of where I was at, not necessarily the book's fault, okay? But I went into this book looking for something that was like quick and fun and easy to read. Because of the writing style, partly, it was very distant third POV and very wordy in how some things were being described. It read a lot slower, and a lot of the action didn't really feel like it picked up until the like 80% mark. So I was torn between being really intrigued by the story and the world building and being kind of bored. So we're following Alize. Alize is like the long lost queen to the Jinn Empire kingdom, and there's this like kind of tension between the Jinn and the clay, and the clay people are humans. And we also have the POV of Cameron, who is the crown prince of the sort of kingdom that we are in, and he's like a very nice guy, but doesn't really want to be king necessarily, and he has a lot of real concerns that he doesn't feel like are always being prioritized in his kingdom, and like the well-being of the people, and like war. They meet somewhat by chance, and it is just this earth-shattering moment. Yeah, I don't know, it was okay, but my main kind of challenge, as I said, with it is that it took most of the book for it to feel like things were really getting rolling. The characters were kind of going about their daily lives and just having these kind of quiet interactions and moments of like, oh no, but it didn't really feel like there was a significant build of tension or suspense for me until we were at the end. And then at the end, I was very intrigued. And so, I don't know, maybe I will pick up the sequel. I'm not sure yet. I need some time to think about it. Maybe. And then the last book that I'm going to chat about is my nonfiction. I am pretty much done this. I have like the conclusion to read, but I think I'm confident that I know how I feel about How to Hide an Empire. Essentially exploring the legacy of imperialism throughout the history of the United States. I'm Canadian, I think I've said that all the time, but I didn't really grow up knowing anything about the US, and I really wanted to understand a little bit more about imperialism, especially because I have been living the last few years in areas that are affected by imperialism and where people have very strong feelings about imperialism related to the US specifically. But because I don't know a whole lot about US history, I don't think that I can really say whether I know that this is biased in one way or if there was something that was said that was problematic or incorrect. I'm just kind of trusting that the author, who is an academic that went to like Oxford or something like that, knows what he's talking about to some degree and is being fairly reliable. I haven't found a whole lot of controversy online about it. But yeah, this is my first foray into anything America except like Trader Joe's. I think it's a really good pick if you're interested in this kind of topic and you're looking for a really broad introduction. I felt that it was quite broad. It looked at a really long span of history, starting from the attitude and the policies around Indigenous people and how that kind of went forward all the way to American military bases and occupation in various countries. A particular chapter that I found really interesting was called Doctors Without Borders. It's not picking on the real sort of organization. It is focused on looking at the legacy of cancer research in the United States and how they conducted experiments and research on people who were living abroad, especially on people who were living in Puerto Rico, and how people who are sort of hero worshipped in the US, like Cornelius Rhodes, are actually really vilified and hated and have a really ugly legacy. So yeah, I'm really glad that I picked it up. It was really interesting, informative. It's a history book. It's a little bit dense. Yeah, that's How to Hide an Empire. A little bit more dense, but I think if you just kind of take it slow and focus on the areas that are particularly interesting to you, then it's a really great book to check out. The only other book that I have to really talk about again with you guys is Angela Carter's book, Fairy Tales. I have been saying that, oh, I'll update you how far I am and what my favorites are the last like 3 wrap-up videos, and I'm just making really slow progress on this one, so I'm probably gonna stop doing that. I am not even a third through. I'm not even a quarter through. I'm really enjoying it. I think I'm just realizing that I'm not one of those people that reads 30 fairy tales in one sitting, and that's what I would kind of have to be doing to talk about it regularly and actually have some real updates to give you. So that's this book. I'm gonna stop updating on it. I am enjoying it a lot. That's all that I read in the month of July. Thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far in the video, please leave a comment and tell me if you've read any of these books that I've talked about, and if not, let me know what the best book you read this month was. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll talk to you guys again in another video very soon. Bye!